Good morning. I'm Carrie Buckendale from Magic 100. Thank you for joining us today. Now, this week we are taking a look at what's called House Bill 581. It's a constitutional amendment regarding property taxes that appeared on the November ballot. It's a complicated topic, but Monroe County Schools Superintendent Dr. Jim Finch is joining me now to help break it down for you. Dr. Finch, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so to get started, can you describe this bill for our listeners? Now, keep in mind, we want to use simple terms because it's a difficult topic and it is pretty early in the morning. So if we could make it as simple as possible.
So this bill applies to property owners who have qualified through a homestead exemption status. Typically, that means the person that owns the home. So it doesn't apply to businesses or rental properties. But if you own your own home, most folks have what's called a homestead exemption, which allows you, not requires you, but allows you to be able to deduct more value on the taxable value of your house. And so when you deduct more value, you pay less in taxes. But property values have increased all over the state of Georgia, most notably in Monroe County. And when property values increase, there's an associated tax value that increases on it too. So as your property increases, historically you've paid more in taxes on that property. This bill is designed to limit the amount of increase that you would pay. And so your house may have a market value of a certain value or a certain dollar amount. And usually, or in the past, the tax value has mimicked that same increase. Mm-hmm. And this House bill is designed to limit that amount of increase. So you may see an increase in the market value of your house, but this bill is designed to slow down the amount of tax value that is on your house. So it's a way to provide taxpayer relief, and it's a way to sometimes there are sharp market increases in housing properties. And so there's always an associated sharp tax increase. And this is designed to limit that.
But again, it is just for people who claim the homestead exemption, correct?
Absolutely. And in Monroe County, we have about 7,800 homeowners who qualify for homestead exemption status.
Okay, so the way it was written, it sounds almost too good to be true. I mean, it's property tax relief. It's right there in front of you. Is there a downside?
Well, obviously the biggest advantage is taxpayer relief. The downside of that is that the amount of money that is generated through property tax revenue, if this cap is put in place, municipalities like city councils, county commissioners, and especially school boards would not receive the same amount of revenue that they would have received had the tax increased at the same amount that the market value of the house had increased. And so what you have to look at is what would be the actual tax value of a house versus the capped value of the house. And whatever the gap is between those two numbers is the amount of lost revenue.
Okay, so while on one hand it is saving money for some homeowners, it could end up costing some money for the district.
Absolutely.
So at the December Board of Education meeting, you recommended the district opt out of this bill. But if the voters approved the amendment here in Monroe County by 59.4%, which is just about 10,000 people that voted, why should we opt out?
Well, the difficult part is that as you know, inflation has hit a lot of areas, including the school business. So education costs have risen, salary costs have risen, so that the cost for labor has risen. Goods and services inside education have also risen. So we need that extra revenue in order to make budget. And if you don't get it because property values for tax purposes have been capped, then you either have to start making cuts. Our largest number of employees, or our biggest percentage of employees, are found in teachers. You really don't want to cut teachers. However, they do represent the biggest percentage of our labor force. And so when you start making cuts, you start making percentage cuts based on the size of the labor force in every sector of your labor force. And we can make cuts in personnel. We would have to make cuts in instructional personnel, admin personnel, support staff personnel. It could be bus drivers, which means longer routes. It could be teachers, which mean more students in their classroom. It could be administrative services, which means less support for the school buildings and for teachers and for things like transportation and school nurses and clerical and whatnot. So whenever you start cutting personnel, you start losing services somewhere. Mm-hmm. And the only other way that you can avoid cutting staff is to raise the millage rate. And so one of the issues that I have with this bill is that you would be extending taxpayer relief on one side of the ledger, while at the same time increasing the millage rate in order to make budget. And it ends up coming out to a net zero effect on the budget, but it appears as though you're giving taxpayer relief on one hand and then you're taking it away through the millage rate on the other. And I just think that's disingenuous. Mm-hmm. That's my own personal opinion. So that's one reason why I don't like it. There are a couple of other reasons. Monroe County is a growing community. And so the value of one mill, the Board of Education has levied 16.212 mills. One mill is worth about 1.8 million. And so you take 1.8 million, multiply it by 16.212, and that's how much local revenue is generated for Monroe County. What the average citizen doesn't know is that we have to actually pay 5 of those mills back to the state. And so if one mill is worth 1.8 million, if you multiply that by 5, that's $9 million that we have to give back to the state. I wish we could give $9 million back to our taxpayers here is what I'd rather do. But the state law does not see it that way when it comes to QBE earnings. And so we have to kind of buy into the QBE earnings that the state gives out. And it's just kind of ironic that the state legislature put this taxpayer relief bill in. And yes, we want to be able to extend taxpayer relief to our constituents, but we don't necessarily want the state doing it for us. We would much rather do it ourselves with local control, because at the same time that the state is asking us to give out taxpayer relief, they're also asking our school board to give $9 million to them. And, I'd much rather just let them keep our $9 million, and then we would definitely be able to roll back the millage rate. But every school district pays a local 5 mil share. So we're not the only school district that does that. Everybody has to do it. But we don't get to generate all 16.212 of our mills. And in fact, you could even say we're only really generating 11.212 of our mills. And so if you were to compare our millage rate to the county, it's pretty much the same by then. And so there have been plenty of people have asked me, why is the education millage rate so much larger than the county's millage rate? And that's why. The other reason why I think that we should invest a little bit more on the education side is that this is our community, and we're expected to educate our community. We can't expect Jones County taxpayers to educate our community. We can't expect the state of Georgia as a whole to educate our community. We're the ones that need to buy into this. And the problem is there's only one opportunity to opt out of this bill. And by conservative calculations, with 7,800 property owners who qualify for homestead tax exemption, we've seen on the most conservative side $1.5 million a year of lost revenue.
How many teachers is that?
That's 15 teachers, because one teacher is approximately $100,000 of salary and benefits. And so, and that's conservative. We've actually run some other numbers as it could be as high as a $2.5 million loss, which is 25 teachers a year, not just $2.5 million over 20 years. That's every year. That adds up over time. And quite honestly, during the here and now, this bill would have a small effect on budget for the next 2 to 3 years. But for this budget over the next 15, 20, 30 years, it would have a huge impact. And you would have people in 2050 questioning, I wonder why the board opted into that. That's not one of the better business decisions. But again, it doesn't make good business sense to opt in it, but it doesn't make good taxpayer sense or public perception sense to opt out of it. And so that's where we're caught in the middle, is that we want to be able to tend to the needs of taxpayer relief for our constituents, but we also want to tend to the needs that our students have. And so fortunately, our school district has continued to deliver on the return on investment for what our taxpayers have paid. And we lead the Middle Georgia area in assessments and CCRPI performances and culture and climate ratings. Most of the people who move here, if it's not the first reason, it's usually the second reason of why they move here, is because they want to be a part of our schools. They want to put their children in our schools. And it's also the chief reason that industry will move here, is because of our school system. And I don't think we need to keep defunding our school system. We won't be the best anymore if we keep defunding it. So we have to fund it at its most optimal rate. And if we can keep doing that, that's the reason why, I've made the recommendation to our board that we opt out of House Bill 581.
So I want to go back to something you said. You were talking about the 5 mil share, and you also mentioned the cap on the amount of property tax people would pay. So while the property tax is going to be capped at a low rate, will that change how much we have to send in our 5 mil share, or do we still have to send the full amount?
Well, the issue with the 5 mil share is this. As the value of one of your meals increases, and let me tell you how the value of your meal increases, is if you get sudden industry to show up. And we're about to get sudden industry to show up. And what I mean by sudden industry is, on Rumble Road alone, just in the last 3 months, we have approved Oglethorpe Power to put a natural gas energy plant there. We have approved a new data center to be put there. And we have just approved for a new Buc-ee's to be put down there. Now, all 3 of those industries are going to drive the value of our meal up possibly over 2 million, maybe 2.5 million. And if you start multiplying that by 5, you're going to start sending back 12.5 million, 15 million to the state. Whereas, the cap on the value of the property assessments that are homestead is going to remain on a suppressed digest. Mm-hmm. But our local 5 mil share is going to be calculated on a full digest. And so the gap is only going to grow the more industry that we bring in here. And so we're calculating conservatively right now to have a $1.5 million gap. When those 3 industries start showing up, you could have anywhere between a $4 or $5 million cap between the full digest versus the suppressed digest. And one of the questions that I've gotten is, well, what is the cap? Well, the cap is based on the inflation rate, which is calculated using the consumer price index, which a CPI number is, there's a national number. I haven't ever been able to find the state number, I'll be honest with you. So I've just used kind of the national number. And the national number over the last 10 years is about 3.46%. Mm-hmm. And so I'll just use my own property. My property was just reassessed in 2024. And the last time it had been assessed was in 2020. And the difficult part of it was that between 2020 and 2024, there were a lot of sharp market increases in home values in Monroe County and across the entire country. So I knew I was going to see a sharp increase in my property value when I found out that it was being reassessed. But it went up 17%. In fact, it almost went up 18%. Well, what this bill is designed to do is that I wouldn't pay the increase on all 17 to 18% of that. I would only pay the increase going up to 3.46%, which is the CPI number right now. Well, it's not right now. It's a floating number based on, inflationary data that you can see across the nation. But over the average, the last 10 years, the consumer price index has been about 3.4. And for this year, 2020, without the fourth quarter in there, it's about 3.20. And so what it would be is that I would only pay a capped value of 3% on my existing property. Instead of the 17 to 18% increase that I saw, I would only pay about 3.46% of that increase. And so the gap between the 17% increase and the 3.4% increase is the amount of lost revenue.
And that really comes into play here because in some markets, property is assessed every year. But here, it is not assessed every year. The new law says what? Every 3 years?
Every 3 years.
Assessed?
The old law was every 5 years. The new year is going to be every 3 years. So it actually puts more strain on your tax assessor's office too. They're going to have to increase their labor force in order to be able to assess property in a smaller time frame, 3 years, instead of a longer time frame, 5 years. The other thing that you have to consider here is that, let's say my house only gets assessed every 3 years. Well, the gap that you see between the cap of 3.46 and maybe 17 to 18% was what the actual rate was. That gap doesn't just exist for 1 year. It exists in year 2 and year 3, and until it gets reevaluated again. So if let's just say there's a gap of $200 between the actual and the capped value. Well, over 3 years, that's $200 every year. That's $600 of lost revenue. And then you multiply that by 7,800 homestead exemptions if all the homes are the same value as mine. Mm-hmm. So again, when we ran those numbers, we got on the low end of 1.5 million. We got on the high end of 2.5 million.
And so real money over time.
That's real money over time, and it's real people over time. Like I said, that's anywhere between 15 to 25 employees, teachers, if you really want to get down to it, because we hire more teachers than we hire anybody.
And just to be clear for our listeners who may not know this, when you're talking about cuts and you're looking at our budget, there's not a lot of wiggle room. The percentage of our personnel versus the budget itself, that's what, about 90% of the budget? 90%
of the budget's personnel. The other 10% is just maintenance and operations, so administrative costs. So that's things like fuel, electricity to run the buildings, water bill, any other type of instructional items, paying for any type of other services like insurance and things like that. So when we're talking about budget cuts or having to find that 1.5 million or upwards of $2, $3, $4 million, we really are talking about people. That's right.
If we were to have to cut people, and I didn't give you a heads up on this one, but I'll ask anyway, how does that directly impact the classroom?
Oh, wow. Well, the number one driving indicator of student achievement is the teacher in the classroom. And the way that you start to impact and affect the teacher's performance in the classroom, the best way to optimize that is to lower the class sizes. And so what you really want is a budget that's healthy enough in order to hire the amount of teachers that you need in order to keep the student to teacher ratio as low as you can keep it. Mm-hmm. Well, if you have to start cutting personnel, the class size may go from 23 up to 28, mm-hmm. or in some cases up to 30 to 32. Well, the minute you start doing that, then student achievement starts to go down. The overall school achievement starts to go down. The overall system achievement starts to go down. and our school data doesn't look as attractive as it does right now. And so when I say attractive, I'm talking about attractive for good families to move in here and enroll their students, good industry to come in here and put their roots down here to do business here in Monroe County. And we have to make sure that we keep investing in our education system so that it can drive so many other economic factors. And this is a huge economic engine that we have here is the school district. And if it keeps performing the way we have been performing, then we're going to keep attracting families that want that type of service and industry that needs that kind of service in order to have the best community possible. And so we all want the highest educated community that we can have at the end of the day. It leads to so many more better outcomes when you have a higher literacy rate in your community, a completion rate of diploma in your community, post-secondary enrollment or post-secondary completion. And when I say post-secondary, I'm talking about anything between military enrollment or technical school enrollment or university enrollment, or just being enrolled in a job. You know what I mean? Being employed, not necessarily enrolled, but employed in a job. When you can put out the product of student like that, then that means that you have a very healthy budget, a very funded budget, and that starts with a commitment from our community to do that. And I think that House Bill 581 hinders that. Maybe again, not in the here and now, but definitely over time, it's going to affect the way that our school business or our school board does business here.
Bill, we have a few minutes left, and I just want to say, listening to you today, as a Monroe County homeowner that has the property tax homestead exemption, it sounds to me, and I do have a child enrolled in the schools, that the only way to really keep what we're doing right now and the high quality education we're providing is the opt-out. Now, for others to hear you say that and to listen to our board and to share their opinions, there are some hearings coming up because we have to treat the potential opt-out just like when we announce a millage rate change. We have the 3 hearings, correct? So when can the public come in and hear you guys talk and share their comments and concerns on this?
We have 3 dates in January. January 7th at a called hearing date. January 14th, which is the regularly scheduled January Board of Education meeting. There'll be a hearing portion there. And then on January 21st will be the 3rd hearing that we're required by law to have for the public to provide input on this matter. Right. And then by February, our board has to fully decide whether or not we want to opt out, and we have to have a resolution that is voted on, and it has to be on file with the Secretary of State by March 1st if we're going to opt out.
And this is the only time to opt out.
The only opportunity we're going to get.
Forever and ever, amen.
Forever and ever, amen. So.
Okay, we have about 2 minutes left, so Dr. Finch, love to get your final thoughts, that one last push on what you think about 581 before we wrap things up.
Well, again, it's a very complicated topic.
It is.
And but at the end of the day, I really think, and we got to keep this in mind too, the way the state referendum was written was, do you support the taxpayer relief that this cap can give while also acknowledging that local governments can opt out of this? And so when you say that Monroe County voted in favor of 59% of that, they didn't just vote for the cap. They voted for the option to opt out too. They voted for both of them. And so our state legislatures, fortunately, they still value local control, and they understand that a one-size-fits-all bill is not what they were trying to design. They wanted to design this bill that if local governments needed to put it in place, they could. And if local governments didn't need to put it in place, they didn't have to. And I've probably talked to anywhere between 6 to 10 legislators that have reiterated that, and they lamented the fact that city councils and county commissioners and school boards could kind of get put into the crosshairs of the public by not taking advantage of a cap and opting out of the cap. And plenty of them apologized to me about that, but because that was an unintended consequence. But at the same time, they also understood why school boards would need to opt out, especially with the local 5 mil share that we have to pay back, or if you have a growing community like ours that's fixing to have a sharp increase in industry. And so I've even had some of them that have recommended, say, yeah, I think y'all would probably need to opt out. And but I'm not here to speak for anyone else but just Jim Finch. And so that's what our opinion is, and we're going to try to move forward with the opt-out process.
Dr. Finch, thank you so much for your time this morning. Again, you have 3 public opportunities to hear about House Bill 581. We will share all the details on our website, on social media. We'll put out more information about this over the next few weeks so that everyone in Monroe County can understand exactly what's going on. We appreciate you listening today. From Magic 100, I'm Carrie Buckendale. Have a great week.